Hello. I'm May Holland, your host today. So, you French, Aussie, Vietnamese host, your guide on this exciting cultural journey. So, welcome to Mosaic Minds podcast. So, I love chatting, as you know, with fascinating women, leaders in Vietnam, and this is really a nice journey for everyone. So, we will explore how their cultural backgrounds have informed their leadership styles, and we are going to delve into the fascinating interplay between culture, leadership, and today eating as well, specifically focusing on how both women are shaping Vietnam. So, introducing the guest today. So, we have Jovel Chan. She's a food blogger, a host of Saigon Supper Club, and a founder of Saigon Social. So, a question to ask to a food blogger: what do you eat for breakfast?
Wow, what a good question. I just ate breakfast too. I love just a soup noodle, so my go-to is always a nice pho or hủ tiếu, or I'll get something, Malaysian or Singaporean noodle soup from one of the local vendors when I really want that taste of home. So yeah, this morning I had wonton mee noodles, like sui cao.
Yeah,
So yeah.
it's delicious. Okay, well, we should meet. Okay, so this is so we're starting today, like having a journey together, and I really
Mhm.
want to ask you some questions, and about your personal journey and basically your cultural influence. So you're from Singapore,
Yes.
and you have been in Vietnam for how many years now?
It's my 5th year in Vietnam. Yeah, feels
Awesome.
long already.
So can you let us know? Okay, so as a Singaporean person who has immersed yourself in Vietnam's vibrant food scene, what cultural experiences inspire you to start your food blog and consultancy?
I think one of the things that really inspired me to start writing about Vietnam was that there's this rise of kind of that craft culinary and cocktail scene, which as a Singaporean, I was not very aware of, I think. And it's something that I think when I landed in Vietnam and was exposed to a lot of local inspired craft. So people who are making things like rice wine, but craft, right? They're really doing this in Vietnam, and you can do it in Vietnam because Vietnam is the rice bowl of Southeast Asia. I think coming from Singapore, where it's a concrete jungle and we don't have access to a lot of these maybe more agricultural products. I think that was the part I was like, wow, trying chocolate with mango, pepper infused alcohol. I just thought that was amazing. So I started to write about it and share about it. And yeah, that's what I do now.
That's awesome. So you have something about what we call the Saigon Social. What is it exactly?
So Saigon Social is a space that I kind of launched about 2 months ago. After writing about 5 years about all these things that I just mentioned, I realized that it was very hard to actually find these things. I'm a food blogger, so I think, you know all the food people and you don't realize that other people don't have this access, right? So I decided to open up a space in District 1 right next to Bitexco, your
My
office.
neighbor.
Exactly. And it's just a small space where we retail 40 to 50 different local craft products, food and drink products. And we host tastings and events for these products. And it's really an experience and educational space where we try to share a little bit more about the craft makers and this more culinary side of Vietnam that's very new.
Sounds awesome. And and
Yeah.
I think I'm going to drop it. So you have Singaporean roots. And can you tell us more about, how your Singaporean roots have influenced your perspective on Vietnamese cuisine, and the way that you approach food storytelling? So you're a food blogger, but what is behind the scene? What is it? I mean, you're talking about the freshness of Vietnam food, the ingredient, the crafting, but what more has influenced your perspective on Vietnamese cuisine?
I think that there's so many things that have influenced me. Being Singaporean, I think that's always my perspective, and that's why I get to really, I think, connect with a lot of an international audience and help them relate to Vietnamese food. Right? Like I said, in Singapore, we don't have access to a lot of these natural resources and ingredients and agricultural products that Vietnamese people are exposed to every single day. So they don't find things that I find really, really, really special. Like even small things, like I would tell you, let's say even cultural things. Vietnamese people don't eat when they drink coffee. Like if you go down to any coffee shop, you will never find, like, it's very rare to find like a lot of pastries in a coffee shop. Coffee shops are really romantic, right? It's very French. You just go there, you maybe have like a coffee and you sit down there for like 5 hours, and you don't really eat anything in Vietnam. For some reason, it's more of a like cigarette and a coffee rather than a croissant with a coffee. You usually get the banh mi like off the street on the way to work. So I think there's so many of these like smaller cultural things that I realized by being Singaporean and in the international, more Western side where where grab coffee to go. Whereas in Vietnam, that's not usually what happens with coffee, right? And I think if being a foreigner gives me that perspective of like, oh, how come, like, why do people eat and drink this way? What does it mean when people in Vietnam ask you to go for a coffee? Why do they not eat and drink together? Like, and I think through understanding how people eat and drink, you can really see how people live, right? And kind of that whole history that has influenced them where they are today. Like, I wonder in Singapore, like, how come we can't even sit in the coffee shop for like an hour if it's not to talk about business? But in Vietnam, it's so normal to hang out and relax in a coffee shop. And there's so many coffee shops. Yeah. So there's so many things that I find the differences and as a result, like appreciate it more. So now it's really like, I make my coffee by Fin and I learn to take it slow, right? Like have these slow mornings rather than like rushing. Like in Singapore and nowadays everywhere in a city you just rush. And then I think I came to Vietnam and I learned to slow down, and that I really learned that through coffee culture.
I love it. I love what you said about the 5 hours drinking coffee. I'm not too sure about that one, but
Not five
I
hours,
love
but
the
it's
five
very
hours, the
normal,
romantic
right?
French thing. Yeah, yeah, no, I get you completely. That is true, man. Now that you're saying that, to me that was so normal, I don't even notice it. But you're
Yeah, a
completely
lot of
right.
my Vietnamese friends, they eat and drink in the, like, they grab the banh mi and then they bring it to the coffee shop and they'll eat it there. And it's very normal, but anywhere around the world, you can never bring outside food into a coffee
Correct.
shop to eat. So yeah, there's so many things that you realize that are different that I pick up that a lot of, I think my Vietnamese friends don't actually, they're like, "Mm,
Food collaboration, this is what we call it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I read on your profile, so you have worked in many countries. You traveled in what, in 50 countries, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've
Wow, that
traveled a
is a
lot.
big number. And you work in Dubai, in Malaysia, and you studied in Switzerland. So how was
Mm.
it, I mean, you mentioned about, you noticing those slow time, compared to Singapore where people, grab a coffee and go. So how is it really, when you arrived 5 years ago, and how is it for you now today after 5 years? How is that transition? How did you adapt culturally to the slowness, to the taking time of enjoy and sitting down and eat compared to the rush, as we mentioned in Singapore, whatever. How do you transition from both worlds?
I think that it's a very big transition, to be honest, because, yeah, like you said, I've always been somebody who's like, go, 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 and go, go, go. And I've lived in countries like Dubai, it's a go, go, go. And then Malaysia is very like city as well. So I've always been in corporate jobs in big cities, like, and also in Singapore, where it's all about going and going. And I think more importantly, they were also countries that were already quite developed, right? And then I arrived in Vietnam 5 years ago. And thankfully, I came during COVID, right? So COVID forced me to also slow down. So I think, it was quite, you have no choice but to slow down during that time and give birth to, my blog, which I think in Vietnam it's the only place that I could have done so, because in Vietnam, it's fast rising, it's developing, it's innovation, it's this, you can do anything. You can be a food blogger and people would be like, wow, okay, you're doing a business. And there's so many people here, like including yourself, you running this podcast. Everybody in Vietnam is doing something. How big, how small, it doesn't matter. Everybody is going, but it's going in a very different way. It's creative and there's variety. I feel that when I came from very corporate, big cities already developed, you're going in a different way. It's going upwards, climbing a ladder. It's not so much a variety and creativity as so much as you're just, I don't know, just going upwards, right? Whereas in Vietnam, it's like it's creative and it's a variety and anybody can become something here. If I were to be a food blogger in Singapore, I'm sure everybody would be like, what are you doing with your life? You know?
Okay.
Like there's so much of like, you know, so much of that, right? Especially when you come from a very developed city, be like, that's not a real job. That's not something you can do. But in Vietnam, everybody is doing something. We're in the land of like content creators, social media influencers. Everybody is doing something. They're selling bananas. They have a banana farm somewhere. They're selling bananas on Zalo. There's just this energy that I really enjoy. Yeah, so I think I've slowed down since 5 years ago, but I've really come to appreciate a lot of things in Vietnam. Vietnam isn't a slow country, it's very fast. But yeah, it's opened up my mind a lot to things and made me a lot more open-minded. Yeah. So I appreciate and I'm slower that way.
How interesting that paradox that you mentioned, so it's fast, everything gets done, as you know, but then at the same time, people take time to slow down as well in that amidst that chaos. And I just wanted to ask you, so when you arrived to Vietnam and you're in Vietnam now, have you or what kind of cultural challenges that you have faced, especially when um, you want to establish yourself, as a trusted voice in the local, F&B industry. So this is in Vietnam, so that's not in Singapore. So how was it, about that cultural challenges? I mean, or maybe you haven't had any.
I think there are loads of challenges, especially in my space, perhaps. I think at the start, I, yeah, like you said, I want to be trusted. And sometimes that also means maybe saying no to certain things that maybe I don't think it's for me. And also voicing out things in the industry that I also feel are not right. And calling out people, not people, I don't call out people, but let's say I feel very strongly about having more women in F&B industry panels and hospitality panels. And if I feel or I see, or I'm invited to panels where there's not enough representation, not just on gender, but also on race and nationality, right? I feel like if we're in Vietnam, there should be a good 50% of us who are maybe Asian or in Vietnam or living in Vietnam or Vietnamese. Of course, I will always say something. And I will always either ask that, should include, and sometimes it might be rubbing off badly. There's a huge face culture here in Vietnam, as in the whole of Southeast Asia. So sometimes when you say no to certain things, when you call out something, when you say something should be better, it sometimes can be taken a bit badly. So I think that that's a challenge, especially in a country where certain things might be a little bit new, like the idea of gender representation and stuff like that, right? Where it might be a little bit new. So I think that's one of the challenges that I think I faced and still face. Yeah. And there are other challenges. For example, the working culture. Sometimes you have to navigate certain things in Vietnam's business environment, which include, doing things that might not be the best legally. So I think that's also, trying to build a culture in my team where it's like, no, do things properly. Just do things properly, even if it means that we have to pay more. I think that sometimes money can be seen as like the only way to be the best in the market is to be cheap and to cut corners. And I understand, right? Because it's a very competitive market in Vietnam, certain industries, especially F&B, so much so that it seems like we're always lowballing and trying to get the best deal and cutting and cutting. So I think that's also a culture thing that was quite hard for me to just be like, no, we're going to charge high. We're going to be better. And, we're not going to do things,
Not cutting corners.
yeah, that are going to cut corners. We're not going to, do certain things that don't seem right. but that seems sometimes to be the norm.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that, and I'm also happy what you mentioned before, but the gender representation and how things can be challenging, especially as a woman. And this podcast today is really about giving space and a voice to women who work in some space where is it can be dominated by men. And I really, I'm very appreciate, what you were saying. And I was just reading in your profile, so you have extensive experience dining in over 150 restaurants, right?
Yeah, there's so many restaurants. I think like so first and foremost, I studied hospitality in Switzerland, which was
Right.
more than like 10 years ago.
Okay.
So I've never done anything else in my entire life. So 150 in Vietnam is quite easy already, right? If you count like all the
Okay.
coffee shops and the cafes and all the places, it's quite easy. I think in the last 5 years, 150, that's only 30 a year.
Okay.
If we go to every single month a new opening. I write a new openings guide in just Ho Chi Minh City for the past 4 years, and I write 10 restaurants every month. It's 120 new openings every month. Times four is 480. I don't go to all of them, but I probably go to like 20% of them.
Okay.
It's not hard, right? If you think about it.
True. True. You're right. You're absolutely right. When you're putting it back into the perspective, yeah, that is very feasible and very realistic. Okay, so based on whatever number of restaurant that you have been dining in, so can you tell us a bit, what kind of cultural trends that you have observed, in the evolving Vietnamese food scene? What have you seen? What's different, in 5 years?
I think when I first came to Vietnam, the dining scene was still very young, to be very honest with you. This modern Vietnamese food scene that we see now was not around 5 years ago. Sure, there's like, you have your staples, like you have Anan, Saigon, and, probably one or two others, but 5 years ago compared to what it is now was not the same. So I think that in the last 5 years, definitely the one thing that has grown is your modern Vietnamese like restaurants that are driven a lot by, your overseas Vietnamese chefs who have come back and opened up restaurants, incorporating their French techniques or Australian techniques or wherever they've been and coming back to redefine what Vietnamese cuisine means to them. And they're coming back at a time where Vietnam is also rising, right? And there's a pride. There's a pride in Vietnam by everybody who's coming back into Vietnam. So I think that support all came together, right? Like in the last 5 years. Then Michelin came in the past 3 years and recognized a lot of these chefs and restaurants and gave stars to, they didn't give, they awarded to well-deserved Vietnamese chefs doing Vietnamese cuisine like Peter Kong from Anan Saigon and Sam from Zia Hanoi. These awards, these stars, which encouraged a lot more Vietnamese chefs to be like, hey, you know what? I see I see my cuisine. I see people who look like me on a global stage in the past 3 years, and they saw, okay, we can do this. This is possible, and that's why we talk about representation, right? That's so important to especially like a younger generation. And I think in the past 3 years, what the Michelin did was really like lift up Vietnam and Vietnamese people and Vietnamese cuisine. And hence, the last 3 years, all we saw was a lot of young Vietnamese chefs and a lot of that. So I think, that kept going up and up and up and up and up. And yeah, now we have a lot.
It's
Now
good
we have
to
a
hear.
lot. Now we have a lot. And the best part is, it's not just overseas Vietnamese chefs anymore. We have Vietnamese chefs anymore. We have the right hands of the chefs from 5 years ago who are now, maybe they didn't go overseas or anything, but they got to learn from, these VQ chefs or foreign chefs, and they have those skills and expertise, and they get to open up new restaurants and that are, their own versions of Vietnamese, and they do it amazingly. So, we're having so much more talent in the market, and so many of them are, have never left Vietnam, and that brings a different perspective to their food. I can always tell when I look at a menu whether the background of the chef.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's amazing, and I think I feel so proud every time I see, like, Vietnamese chefs doing really well and those that have not gone overseas, because that is 95% of the population. And, we see representation when they see chefs who are just like that, making it really big on a global stage. They say, okay, then even though I haven't gone overseas or I don't have the means to, I can make it. So I think that's also important.
So basically, you're talking that kind of fusion of traditional Vietnamese flavors with modern culinary techniques. Like you're talking about chef from overseas, VQ chef as well, and now you're talking about the local chefs. So
Yeah.
that really reflects a cultural shift in Vietnam. So how can you tell a bit more? So you're talking about those young chefs bringing a new perspective. Can you tell a little bit more that new trend? Because I'm absolutely interested in knowing that fusion of traditional and modern techniques. So how do they navigate all that space?
A lot of chefs, there are some new chef, like there are some chefs here, and they don't have the luxury sometimes of learning, like, French technique, or let's say going to France, right? So what I feel sometimes they deliver are I wouldn't say that it's a lower quality in any way, but it's almost like a new category of their own food. And what I think they always do is a very casual. They do Vietnamese tapas. They do, like I saw kum tam little bites, and they would like make the rice, and it looks almost like a tapas sushi. So it's more casual. It's not fine dining, but it's so them. It's I think to say it's fusion is also, it's not fair, because it's not like it's inspired by Spanish food in any way. It's just a reimagination of what Vietnamese food it is. And you go to cocktail bars now, you can see like small little Vietnamese tapas, and like little snacks, and topped with different fillings. It's just their imagination, having worked in different restaurants around Saigon. It's just how they are now. It's not fine dining. There's no French technique. There's no Spanish technique, but you see it everywhere now. Like you go to a cocktail bar, you go to a cafe, you see it. And it's some kind of rendition of a street food staple.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not fine dining, but it's more casual fun dining maybe.
I love how you say it.
Yeah, I don't really know how to describe it, but yeah, to me, I just call
We
it like,
need another word for tapas, when you say tapas, everybody will get it, but we need another
yeah,
word, which
but
is
they
like,
don't, but they haven't worked in Spanish restaurants. It's just what they're doing. It's amazing.
and coming back to what we talked about, the gender representation, any people, any woman, female entrepreneur, who are influencing you or who inspire you for whatever reason. I mean, do you have any women that they really, really inspire you?
I think there are many women who are very inspiring, obviously in F&B. I have written many, many articles about, I think women in F&B and hospitality. One particular one that I feel is like a person who is like a personal mentor to me is Patricia. I think Patricia is from ex Starbucks CEO, and now she's a footlong with Masan. And I think when it comes to F&B and hospitality in Vietnam, as a woman female powerhouse, she's definitely like up there. And I think she's particularly very inspiring to me because she's very vocal about female representation in the industry. And secondly, she has a lot of respect from a lot of her male peers. Thirdly, she is also very empowering of other women in her team. And fourth, she is never ever late, and she always makes time for your team, for her team, and for me. And every time I have had to navigate challenging waters as a woman in this industry, she has always managed to give me very helpful advice on how to navigate it. Yes. And she's always made the time to help me navigate it. And I think that as women in the industry, we think that helping to empower means that, we network and we introduce people to each other, but it's also about sending down a lot of opportunities and saying their name in rooms where they are not involved in. And I think that she's definitely one of them who goes above and beyond for women.
That's wonderful because she's actually also she's on the podcast on the same season as you. So you will hear
Amazing. Yeah,
you
I
will
know she's
listen to her
fantastic.
podcast as well. Very, very a lot of very cultural, beautiful cultural insight as well. So I love it. Different countries, the cultural space that's make this the word so rich, so diverse and
Yeah.
so rich. So I really like that. So that is awesome that you talk about Patricia. And I really, because we're talking about diversity, we're talking about, the sense of belonging and you live in many countries, you work in many countries. So Vietnam has obviously an influence on you. And I was wondering if, when you go to other countries, usually, people say, oh, you learn this from, the US or you learn this from Australia, whatever. What would you say about, what have you learned about Vietnam that you can give as a nice insight, for people, outside of Vietnam who don't know Vietnam? What kind of cultural insight, advice, or anything which, you might, how come I haven't thought about it? What is the learning lesson that you would like just to share with somebody who hasn't been or don't know about Vietnam very well?
I think that Vietnam is the kind of country you have to be here to really get to know Vietnam and for people to trust you. So there are many companies and many businesses that are trying to establish themselves in Vietnam, let's just say. Don't even try to, do it remotely. I feel there's no way you're going to do it remotely or think that by hiring maybe a local team that's all it's going to be, right? I learned that, I think, a hard way. I came here during COVID, and coming from Singapore and a lot of other countries, the first thing that you try to introduce yourself is where you went to school, what you used to do, and you try to, flash out all the companies that you worked with and all that stuff, right? And I'm pretty sure that nobody even gave me a single meeting, and they were like, okay, one of these girls, And then I started writing my food blog. And, during COVID, I was very actively volunteering and, giving out food and stuff like that, working with the local police. And believe it or not, that was how I got my name out and people started trusting me and how I actually started making a living. It was not, coming here and trying to toot my own horn and saying who I've worked with and what companies I've worked with. It was actually being on the ground and doing the work and people seeing what you can accomplish and seeing what you can do other than anything else. So I think that was the thing I learned the most in Vietnam. It doesn't matter what company you work for, what your title is. Nobody cares. It's what have you done in Vietnam? Who in Vietnam is saying your name? And it's so easy to have a good CV, right? And anywhere in the world nowadays. True, you can say that you've done A, B, C, D, E, but who knows, right? And then I wrote this blog, and then during COVID, and the next day, I had like 10, 15,000 people just sharing all of it. And everybody was like, okay, this is the girl that, knows her food. And that's where I really started to get business and get work and know a lot of people and gain trust. So nowadays, even though I've done so many things, like sure, I've opened a business and sure, we've worked with so many companies. We work with Singapore Tourism Board and whatever. I still tell myself, okay, like doesn't matter, right? Just do what it is for the people. Make sure people trust you. You don't have to boast or say you do anything. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very beautiful lesson. And so you have your business here, so you have your shop, which I will drop in. We're absolutely neighbor.
Sure.
Last time I was looking for it. So can you just reflect on your own self leadership? So so you went Switzerland before, you went Malaysia and Singapore and all those countries, which are a little bit different, leadership styles and cultural style than Vietnam. And now you have your shop in District 1 next to BTEXCO. Can you reflect on your self-leadership now that when you're working with people, what is it that you are doing and you didn't do before? Why is it that have changed because or thanks to Vietnam?
I spend a lot of time in person with my team now. Don't take for granted or I don't assume they know things that I know. I don't do that. I meet them a lot because first and foremost, I unfortunately can only speak English, So sometimes a lot of how we talk and communicate, I need to make sure body language wise that they understand me and I understand them. So I do a lot of in-person stuff nowadays that I think back in the day, let's say in my corporate jobs in Singapore, Dubai, it's so easy to just send an email because we all speak English, or maybe we come from a corporate, a corporate background that we understand certain systems and stuff like that. But in Vietnam, especially now we do F&B. I love my team and I realize, but I don't take for granted that what I know might be what they know. I really take time to do a lot of in-person things, and I make sure that to build culture is to also make sure that I show them how it's done. Yeah. So I realize as a leader, as a boss, as a role model, besides the work stuff, the technical knowledge that I don't take for granted, even the softer stuff as well, I am a lot more mindful about how I am and behave as a leader, how they see me and how I am, so that they can also follow me. So I think in so many ways, I'm making sure that I'm a lot more connected to my team, and I need to do that in Vietnam as opposed to other countries, because separate certain countries like Singapore, we have a very developed and we understand corporate culture very well. We have established corporate culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know what
But
you mean.
in Vietnam, I'm hiring people who come from small businesses and
You're co-creating the culture.
yeah, you're actually creating the culture and what it means for them to work in a business, even from what can you wear to work to how do you shake hands, how do you greet your team, and how do you not greet your team. I go in there and I also make sure that I dress quite well, that we're all kind of on time, and we say hello, like have to create that. Otherwise, it's not something that I expect them to know for sure.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
have, to be fully aligned. Oh, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. There's a lot of in person, but I enjoy the in person as well to make sure. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. You really have, whether it's for companies, like I've worked with companies to help, like build and train marketing teams, like younger marketing teams. And they're established like 20-year-old companies in Vietnam doing food manufacturing for certain raw materials. And the marketing team, they're so young. I have to go in there and be like, okay, this is what we wear, this is how we reply to emails, this is what we should do. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I realized you have to actually establish.
Right. Okay. No, that's awesome. So you gave us a lot of insight. So we talk about, the importance of connection, the importance of trust, the importance of connection with slowness and slowing down despite that things get fast as well.
Mm.
And what is it that what people can learn from Vietnam, outside of Vietnam? And you also talk about the gender representation, that sense of diversity that which is very, very present. And I really want to wrap up with one advice that we want to hear from you. So you know that the podcast is called Mosaic Mind. And
Yes.
it's really about how you create your mind, your mindset, and take whatever bit which works, whether from the word or from other people, and then to create that mosaic mind which works, so then you can really embrace, the beauty of the word. What would be an advice from you for our listener to have a mosaic mind coming from a blogger like you?
Think open-mindedness is very important, and not letting yourself be limited by titles. Yeah. So I know we're running short of time, but I'll tell you something that really changed my mind. When I came to Vietnam after I lost my job in the airline in Malaysia, I came here and I started writing this blog without thinking that I was going to be a food blogger. It was a very accidental thing. It gave me a lot of anxiety and a loss of direction and identity, because I came from, head of like marketing at a MNC to something, and it messes with you a lot. And I didn't think much of what I was doing, and I didn't think highly of myself because I didn't think that it was a title that I identified myself with. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes you talk about mosaic minds. I think I was very one-minded, and I think if not for a friend of mine, I hired a coach to help me expand my mind, to be focused a lot more on the mission and what we do as a bigger picture. than just a title. He came to me and he said, "You're not just a food blogger. You know, you keep telling yourself that, you put yourself in a box, that all you can do is just write." He said, "No, but why do you do what you do? You have a mission. And what can that mission become in different channels and platforms?" And when I saw that, that was when I started doing Saigon Supper Club, the dinners. And that was when I opened up the space. And it's still all the same mission, and all the stories are just coming to life, and it's very fulfilling now. But yeah, I think the biggest advice was really, not putting limitations, especially on titles, that we think that we are only worth, or what we can only do what a job title gives us,
Yeah.
right? And that's just a box. And I think that's a very scary thing to be in, is when your job title becomes you.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your story. So thank you very much, for sharing all those wisdom, insight, and absolutely, you really make me hungry now. But really, Jovel, I really wish you the best.
Thank you so
Definitely will
much.
drop in to see you. But
Thank
thank
you.
you for your wisdom today, for your insight.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And taking
Absolutely,
the time to
absolutely.
reflect as well is very helpful.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks very much. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.